Welcome on this beautiful day to the New America Foundation. My name is Patrick Doherty, and I'm the Deputy Director of the American Strategy Program. We're excited today to have with us a remarkable leader in the decades-long effort to forge peace in the Middle East, Dr. Jehan Sadat. Dr. Sadat, I believe she would say, did not choose the role she has now embraced. As the wife of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat, Jehan was the first a witness to the devastations of war, the promise of peace, and then the horror brought by fundamentalist extremists from her own country when a group led by none other than Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri assassinated her husband during a military parade. Some people would have been tempted to hatred, but Dr. Sadat has embraced a path of the peacemaker, becoming a living testament to these truths her husband knew while working for peace with Israel. Her husband, President Sadat, said, "You, sorrowing mother, you, widowed wife, you, the son who lost a brother or a father, all the victims of wars, fill the air and space with recitals of peace, fill bosoms and hearts with the aspirations of peace, make a reality that blossoms and lives. Make hope a code of conduct and endeavor." Today, Dr. Sadat divides her time between her home in Egypt and her adopted home here in the United States. She is a scholar in residence at the University of Maryland, and we are honored today to have you with us. The proximate cause of today's events is the publication of Dr. Sadat's latest book, My Hope for Peace, which I have started and am greatly enjoying. I hope in her remarks, and I know in her remarks, Dr. Sadat will touch on the themes of the book. But first I wanted to demonstrate how long it has taken to move not very far in the search for Middle East peace since the passing of her husband. Last week marked the 30th anniversary of the Camp David Accords. But the core thesis of that agreement still remains unrealized. 2 years before those accords, President Sadat made a speech before the Knesset in Jerusalem. 32 years ago, last November. And he said this, and it struck me as exactly what we're still trying to strive for. "Conceive with me a peace agreement in Geneva that we would herald to a world thirsting for peace. A peace agreement based on the following points: ending the occupation of the Arab territories occupied in 1967, achievement of the fundamental rights of the Palestinian people and their right to self-determination, including their right to establish their own state, the right of all states in the area to live in peace within their boundaries, their secure boundaries, which will be secured and guaranteed through procedures to be agreed upon, which will provide appropriate security to international boundaries, in addition to appropriate international guarantees. Commitment of all states in the region to administer their relations among them in accordance with the objectives and principles of the United Nations Charter, and ending the state of belligerence in the region." Ladies and gentlemen, peace is not a mere He continued to say, "Ladies and gentlemen, peace is not a mere endorsement of written lines. Rather, it is the rewriting of history. Peace is not a game of calling for peace to defend certain whims or hide certain admissions. Peace is, in its essence, a dire struggle against all and every ambition and whim. Perhaps the example taken from ancient and modern history, teaches that missiles, warships, and nuclear weapons cannot establish security. Instead, they destroy what peace and security build." I think it's all too true today. It is time, once again, for bold leaders to take the reins of history and forge a new peace for the Middle East. With the support of such leaders as Dr. Jehan Sadat, I am sanguine that we will still have a fighting chance. Please help me in welcoming her to the podium.
Good morning. I am a woman of Egypt, a woman with a mission. My mission is to continue my husband's work for peace, peace with dignity, honor, and justice. I have 4 children, 3 girls and 1 son. I have 11 grandchildren. I have 8 great-grandchildren, and I'm very proud of each of them. A few weeks ago, I launched the publication of my new book, My Hope for Peace, in Rhode Island, one of 2 islands in the Nile surrounded by the hustle and bustle of Cairo. When I was growing up in the serenity of Rhode Island, I had little knowledge of what was going on in the world. We didn't have the internet, satellite TV, or 24-hour cable news. Of course, my family felt the effects of World War II and the Arabs' war with Israel as a result of a partitioning of the Palestinian by the British. I was not, however, fully aware of the animosity that existed between Egypt and Israel, Muslims and Jews. My life changed completely when at 15, almost 16, I married Anwar Sadat. Sadat was my hero and the hero of Egypt, first because he resisted the British occupation, then years later because he gave us peace. Last week I was in New York and Philadelphia, and now I have come to Washington to talk to you about my hope for peace, a hope that has never faded or faltered, despite the greatest tragedy of my life, the assassination of my husband in 1981, and in spite of all the failed attempts to secure a comprehensive peace in the Middle East since then. When I first came to the United States in the winter of 1985, I had no intention of staying and I had nowhere to live. Actually, Dr. Kissinger, who helped me to find a home in Georgetown, which I lived, it was for one of his friends, and I was very happy to stay there for a while, just few months, and then I bought my home, which I live in now. Last Thursday, March 26, was a very special day for me. Because on that day, 30 years ago, I was here in Washington with my husband and our children for an extraordinary ceremony, the signing of the Camp David Accords, Peace Accords. It was a beautiful day, and my heart was overflowing with pride and happiness as I sat with Rosalind Carter and Eliza Begin, watching my husband, along with theirs, sign the first and most enduring peace treaty in the Middle East. Then later in the evening, the Sadats and the Begins were dining together with the Carters in the White House. Those who were once enemies were acting like old friends, catching up on old times, because now we could relate to each other from the perspective of peace. It was a glorious day that made us hope that this treaty was just the first step towards a just and comprehensive peace in the Middle East. We were floating on a cloud of optimism, but that was then. Today, the hope we had 30 years ago remains an elusive dream, even though there have been times when I thought this dream for a greater peace was about to come true. My optimism was renewed in 1993 when President Clinton gently pushed Itzhak Rabin and Yasser Arafat into shaking hands as a symbol that the Israelis and Palestinians were ready to recognize each other. I was attending this ceremony in the White House, and I remember after a while they came, after finishing the speeches, they came down to shake hands with the people. I was sitting beside Dr. Kissinger, and then Itzhak Rabin came and told me, "Your husband's picture was in front of me all the time." I was as if he was watching with us what happened. My hope was revived again in 1996, when Jordan joined Egypt in not only recognizing but also making peace with Israel. Since then, there has been nothing but trouble. The events of the past 30 years have seen Sadat's noble dream of peace wax and wane, at times almost fade as the Palestinians and the Israelis intensify their fighting, while Lebanon and Syria are waiting to see what will happen next. In conditions like these, how could anyone hope for peace? But I do. And I am not alone. Millions of moderates just like me are waiting for the feuding leaders to put aside politics, roll up their sleeves, and finally give the people of the region the widespread lasting peace they deserve. But this has not been the case. So far, the tensions have grown only higher with the Israelis invading Gaza and the Palestinians launching rockets into Israel. And if this weren't enough, the terrorists are keeping everyone on edge. In light of all of this, is there any doubt that there is an urgent need to revisit Sadat's strategy for making peace? Although my husband and his method of making peace have been often criticized and vilified during the past 30 years, Sadat's style is now widely accepted, even if it is not widely imitated. With all the failed attempts and with President Obama's renewal of America's involvement in the Middle East, it is time to re-examine the principles that made Sadat successful. First, the leaders should accept that all people, regardless of religion, culture, or position in life, want to live in peace. Although promises of peace are nectar to the ear, people need leaders who will commit to making and keeping peace, not waging war and prolonging hardships. Second, the leaders need to be realistic while being sincere. In 1977, when Sadat announced to our parliament that he would go to the ends of the earth for peace, his audience, including Yasser Arafat, applauded. People were encouraged, even though no one in the Arab world really thought peace could be made with the Likud leader, and especially with Menachem Begin. But it happened. Menachem Begin did make peace with Sadat and Carter. In Egypt, we are now hoping Prime Minister Netanyahu will take more moderate approach this time. We hope he will be more like Begin. When Sadat went directly to the Israeli people to propose peace, he was 100% sincere, and his style of face-to-face negotiating proved it. Third, the leaders must accept that no peace process is self-sustaining. For many, the past several years of so-called peace process in the Middle East has been just a myth, a lot of talk with few results. My husband believed that as president he had to be the energy and the engine in the first peace process between the Arab nation and Israel. He had to set the tone, and ultimately he was the one who had to make the big decisions for our country. Fourth, the leaders must forgive, thereby allowing us to forgive. President Carter once said that Anwar Sadat was more inclined to look towards the future than to dwell on the hate-filled and often bloody past. This is true, and this is why peace was the definitive goal of my husband's presidency and his life. Finally, the leaders must have faith. No one can take the political and personal risks required for peace in the Middle East without having faith, without possessing and showing a steadfast determination to enact God's will, to love your enemy as yourselves. We are all God's children, and we all deserve to live in peace. We must not forget that it was a Muslim, a Christian, and a Jew who gave us the first and most enduring peace treaty. These simple yet profound principles took Sadat to Jerusalem, to Camp David, and finally to Washington. He was a soldier who moved from war to peace. He thought, before going to Israel, he thought many times before he took the decision to go, that what is the end of all these wars? Going through wars, both sides are losing, both sides are economically affected. What is it is a vicious circle, really, that we are going through, that he has to decide to put an end to it. These principles worked for my husband, and I believe with all my heart that they will work now. While I naturally wrote in this book about Sadat's style of making peace and the crucial issues yet to be resolved, I also wrote about the peace of Islam. Sadly, since 9/11, many in the West consider Islam in broad terms and with stereotyped examples as a religion of violence and fanatics. In Islam, we are told not to kill one another. I can also say with unwavering certainty that fanaticism is not Islam. After many years of traveling and speaking in the United States, I know there are many in the West who, whenever they hear a Muslim say Islam is a religion of peace, can recall only images of angry men waving Qur'ans and burning American flags. People who spread such propaganda wants to convince you that Muslims are on a mission to dominate the world. With anger and scorn in their voices, they hope to convince you that Muslims and Islam are evil. Is this true? Absolutely not. In this book, I try to set the record straight. I want my readers to know that all Muslims are not extremists. We do not hate America. We do not hate freedom and democracy. Maybe we hate sometimes the policy. To the contrary, Islam is a dynamic democracy that demands for all people, Muslim and non-Muslim, the basic human freedoms, social justice, and above all, peace. To make my point, I write about my own experience as a believer, for Islam, like all faiths, cannot be understood only as a collection of beliefs, but rather in the context of how it transforms and inspires the lives of the individuals who follow it. When Martin Luther King accepted his Nobel Peace Prize, he said, "We have to live together, black and white, Gentiles and Jews, Catholics and Protestants, Muslims and Hindus, a family unduly separated by ideas, cultures, and interests, who, because we have never again lived without each other, must learn somehow to live with each other in peace." I agree, but I also believe that before we can learn to live together, we must explore the depth of our own souls in order to answer, what is the purpose of my life? So in this book, I explore the broader theme of peace by describing my own often stressful process of self-evaluation that arose as a consequence of my husband's assassination and, strangely enough, the events of 9/11. As I told you earlier, I was very young when I married Anwar Sadat, and just 4 years after we married, my husband became a member of our government. Thus, at 19, I found myself thrust into a public stage, and at that young age, I was always thinking about what can I do for women, what can I do for the disabled, what can I do for the people. I was working in charities all the time before my husband became a president. When he became, I found this is my opportunity to ask for so many things for women. And I was nagging all the time, and he was fed up from me sometimes. And every time he traveled, I used to accompany him. And every country we visited, he used to sit with the Egyptian who are studying or working in this country and ask them if they have any problems to solve it for them. We were sitting in Washington, D.C., and on the podium he was sitting, I was beside him, and they were asking him questions, the Egyptian, and he was answering. And then I found it's an opportunity again. I wrote a note, I gave it to my assistant, and I told him, the last lady in red, give it to her. He gave her the note, and they were talking, my husband was answering, and then she raised her hand and she said, Mr. President, when are you going to give us our rights? We need so 1, 2, 3, and started, saying what she wants. And he looked at her and he said, oh my God, if Jehan was not sitting beside me, I would say that she told you to say this. In the public's eye, I have lived a life of ebbs and flows. I've been praised and criticized for being a feminist. I've been called a pioneer for women's rights, while at the same time branded responsible for the destruction of Arab families. I have been accused of being a mere mouthpiece for Sadat, while at the same time exerting an important and positive influence. After my husband's death, all of my progressive ideals were severely put to the test. Suddenly I had to make my own way by the sweat of my own brow. Sure, I could have stayed in Cairo, where I could have lived a comfortable life as Sadat's widow, surrounded by everyone and everything I love. I could have had a life of quiet contentment, except for the one question that kept chewing on my ear. What do I have to offer the world? To find my answer, I had to leave Egypt, not because I was unhappy, but rather because I wanted a new challenges. And for me, these challenges were waiting in America. I moved to Washington, D.C., finished my PhD, and began lecturing at American University in Washington, D.C., Radford University in Virginia, and the University of South Carolina in Columbia. And now I'm settled with the University of Maryland. I also took up a new career as a public speaker while working for years to raise enough money to endow the Anwar Sadat Chair for Peace and Development at the University of Maryland. And this chair also has so many activities, which I'm very happy that an American university is honoring my husband and continuing his work for peace. We send students to the Middle East to mingle with others, to talk about peace and the possibility for it, and they come back. I can't tell you how much I am very impressed by what they say, and I wish the leaders will be as flexible as these young generation. And we invite also celebrities to talk about peace, like Nelson Mandela, like Kofi Annan, Dr. Kissinger, President Carter, of course, Ezra Weizman, before, of course, he died, and Mary Robinson, James Baker III, George Mitchell, Mr. Baradei, also the Egyptian. And we had many celebrities talking, and we are continuing this. And I almost forgot that during this time, I was also writing my first book, A Woman of Egypt. Believe me, none of this was easy. It was simply something I had to do, and I could have never done any of it without the inspiration and strength I drew from the proud legacy of Egypt's feminists, the support of my family, and most important, my faith. I stand before you as an independent working woman who is also part of the tradition of strong Muslim, Arab, and Egyptian women. I am a woman of Egypt who lives in two different worlds and loves both. When writing my hope for peace, I drew on my experiences as a political wife, and advocate for peace and women's rights, and educator and a wife and mother in a society that is both traditional and devout in in an attempt to dispel a few of the old myths about Oriental women, in particular, the one that claims we are confined by Islam. Yes, there are obstacles for Muslim women, especially for the poor and illiterate, but isn't this true for all poor and illiterate women, regardless of where they live or how they believe? Social and economic conditions are the roadblocks, not Islam. Human interpretation of religion, not religion, deprives women of their rightful place in society. For instance, if we can look to the women in Afghanistan, and they are Muslims, and see how they are covered, how they are staying at home, not doing anything, and look at the women in Egypt, how they are active and involved in so many activities in our country, and both are Muslims. The biggest roadblock, however, is the absence of peace, for without it, every society is robbed of its potential. More than 30 years ago, my husband made a difficult but simple choice to make peace, his political and personal priority, not for himself, but for his people and future generations. Because I believe as he believed, and because I love him with all of my heart, I supported him 100%, even though I knew and he knew that I would lose him. I am proud beyond words of what my husband did for the people of Egypt. Today, the leaders of the Israelis, Palestinians, Syrians, and Lebanese must make a choice between continuing conflicts of the past or making peace. With peace, generations to come might, with our help, slowly free themselves of the pitfalls of our history. Those who are standing on the sidelines watching the tragic drama play out on the evening news must also make a choice. They must choose between believing the propaganda or accepting that good people far outnumber the bad, that peace will always be better than war. As happy as I am that the treaty my husband gave his life to bring has remained since the date of its signing, I will never be completely satisfied until the Palestinians are no longer an occupied people and the Israelis finally feel safe and secure living among millions of Arabs. The time has come to end this bitter conflict. I realize my hope for peace in the Middle East can be construed as optimistic thinking, but against all odds, Anwar Sadat, Jimmy Carter, Menachem Begin, the Muslim, the Christian, the Jew, did the unthinkable in the Middle East. They made peace. In their souls, in their hearts and minds, peace was the only choice for them to make. Peace, this word, this idea, this goal, is the defining theme of my husband's life and of mine. I have spent a lifetime hoping and praying for peace. Thus, I must confess that my real reason for writing this book is to recruit a region who will pray with me, who will embrace and share my hope for peace, who will, when asked if we can have peace in the Middle East, will answer, yes, we can. This I took it from Obama, by the way. And so I say to you, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, and God bless you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If you'd like, you could take questions from the podium, or you could have a seat, whichever you're more comfortable
Whatever.
with.
Well, that would.
Would you
much
like to
more
sit? Okay, very good. Very good.
Thank you.
What I'd like to do is just ask a first question, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And we've got one of my colleagues, Tom, is in the back with a microphone, so if you could wait to get the microphone and then identify yourself and ask your question, we'll get right to it. you stopped on the note of yes, we can.
Yes.
And President
I
Obama.
liked it very much.
I think it's
I
very
was
appropriate.
watching President Obama all his campaign, and I like this very much. But I'm using it.
And we're in a moment where we have a new envoy. We have many problems around the world that we're dealing with. But from your experience, could you talk about the moment as you see it before the world, before the Middle East leaders today, and in particular, what has been the reception of President Obama in Egypt, in the larger Arab world, to the extent that you feel comfortable describing that, and could you talk about the pace of peace building? Are we moving fast enough? And just go into some of your thoughts on where we are now and where we need to be going.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, I want to say that, is this working? Yes. First, I want to say that having Obama, really it made the people very, very happy. I bet not only in the Middle East, but must be all over the world, because he was willing to change the image of America outside. As I said in my speech, we don't hate America at all, American people, but on the contrary, we love the American people. They are so nice people, but we hate the policy, which was before Obama. It was not really fair with both sides. And I am one who like both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians. And I like them to be treated fairly and equally, not biased to one side and neglecting the other side. So many leaders visited Gaza, for instance, and Gaza is condensed with people, very crowded, and people are so poor there and suffering a lot, and they visit and come back and forth, and nothing happened. Nothing changed to these people, really. I wish the peace will come and prevail, so that what my husband did and what he paid his life for will never, ever go in vain. What is happening now is that we have the hope, because of President Obama. We have the hope that he sent such a very decent man, who is Senator Mitchell, George Mitchell. George Mitchell, we brought him to the University of Maryland, and he talked about Sadat chair, and he was talking also about what he did in Ireland, and he was very successful. I hope he will do the same in our area. Really, it is very hard to see people suffering, and when anything happens between the Israelis and the Palestinians, our government takes care of this. They bring them to Egypt, they try to reconcile between both, and they try to bring them together. Even when the Palestinians themselves are divided between Hamas and Fatah, Egypt also is still till today, while I'm talking to you, they are trying to bring them together as one unit so that they can talk and negotiate with the Israelis. The Israelis will not negotiate with the Hamas at a side and the Fatah on another side. No, they are going to negotiate with both together. And to bring them together, it was not an easy task for Egypt to do, and they are still doing it. Hopefully, so many problems between them were solved, but not all till now. And for myself, I'm looking, even from Netanyahu, who came last time and he didn't do anything. And he was very tough on the whole issue. But this time, I heard or I read in something that he is willing to change, willing to do something. And I am praying that he will imitate Begin. Begin was very difficult during the negotiation, but he was a man of his word. He kept his word and kept his promise. And he was a leader, a real leader. I wish Netanyahu will imitate Begin and put himself in history as a man of peace. And he can do it. He can do it. if there's a will, there's a way. If he is sincere to make peace, he will. Rabin was sincere to make peace, but unfortunately he was killed like my husband. I don't know if Netanyahu will be sincere also. I hope he will be and make peace so that all the people will live in peace atmosphere together, side by side, and concentrate on their problems, which are many in our area. Concentrate on raising the standard of their people, which we needed it so much. It is such something that they can, and the Israeli can also pull out. And there is, when they say the problem is with returning the Palestinians, returning to Israel. So what? Let them return. They are already settled in other places, and they are succeeding in their other places. But they have the right to go back to visit their neighbors, to visit their families. It is their right when there will be peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. It's the Palestinians' right to go and visit, not to say, no, they shouldn't come. This is not fair. And also, for instance, Jerusalem, when we say the capital for the Palestinians, so many people, they say, oh, no, how come? Well, Jerusalem, the old, I'm not talking about all Jerusalem. Jerusalem is spread in a way and became very big. I'm talking about the very old part of Jerusalem, which was occupied after 1967 war. It was not at that time with the Israelis. It was with the Palestinians. These are little things. It will not make that big thing to the Israelis, and they could do it and could make the people live in peace and love each other instead of hating each other. I'm against the rockets which they send, the Palestinians send, because I believe it doesn't do anything. It doesn't. Well, it's like fireworks, exactly. It's not damaging, it's not killing, but it's not right to send them also. Not right to launch rockets to Israel. And Israel also answer back. What we saw recently in Gaza was a tragedy, a real tragedy for innocent women and children and men, innocent men who didn't do anything, just being killed with thousands. That is not fair. We want people to live in love, to live in peace, to, as I said, to concentrate on so many other things which we need to do. And I hope it will work. I am praying, and I'm not young, but I believe I will see the peace prevail in my lifetime.
Inshallah.
I believe.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Yes.
Okay. Why don't we open it up to the floor? Tom's got a microphone in the back. Who'd like to ask the first question? The lady in the leopard top.
Even we hear each other. Not even in microphone.
Thank you.
Well, we're recording this actually, so and it's.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
Hello, my name is Jessica, and thank you for coming here today to speak. My question is that words like peace and hope and dreams, they're beautiful words, and man, do I want that. But how will the U.S. and Egypt and Israeli leaders deal with such radical leaders who cannot or will not embrace these words?
Well, you are right. I am not living in illusion. I'm not living in fancy. I am a very realistic woman, but still believe that peace will come because it happened with Sadat. If maybe you were not born, 30 years ago, when Sadat made peace with Israel, nobody believed. Nobody could think it will happen. Nobody thought it is something far away from realistic. But it happened. And Begin was not easy, and Sadat was not easy. Both of them were very stubborn. But they reached the solution, and they did make peace. That's why I believe it will happen. After 15 years, it happened with Jordan and the Israeli. They made peace, and it happened between them. Another 15 years now, it's about time. It seems every 15 years something will happen. That's why I'm very hopeful also. It will happen. There are radical people. Yes, there are. But when they start negotiating, they will, I mean, try to, each side will try to take, and I'll tell you, during Sadat's negotiation with Begin was not easy at all. Sadat suffered. But he knew that Begin was asking more for his country, and he's working for the benefit of his country, and this is his right. And Sadat was doing the same for his country. But even though, as I said, two stubborn men, but they were leaders, and they were putting their people above themselves, and they were sincere, and they believed in peace. That's what make it happen. And it will happen, hopefully, because believe me, not me only, millions of Arabs, millions of Israelis, so many millions of people wanted to live in peace. They don't want any more war and aggression and violence and things like that.
Okay. Gentleman on the... Yeah, right there.
Mohammed Al-Minshawi from Taqrir, Washington, and Ashruk newspaper. President Sadat made his historical initiative by visiting Israel 30 years ago. Yet President Mubarak, during his 28 years in office, didn't visit Israel yet. Do you think he should visit Israel, and will it make any change if he visited Israel?
Well, actually, President Mubarak visited Israel when he was paying condolences when Rabin died. He went... I beg your pardon? Are you with them or with Egypt? Well, Shuruk, by the way, it's a new newspaper which is very, very, very good newspaper. Maybe the best we have in Egypt.
Good advertising for you.
Yes, really. No, it's really very good one. And, Mubarak will go there if there will be such something to encourage him. But what was going the last few years were only, as I said, rockets going there, aggression coming here, war between the Palestinians, war between the Israelis. It didn't encourage President Mubarak to go. But believe me, he is doing his best to bring them together. Whenever there is something between the Palestinians and the Israelis, because he and Egypt has good relationship with Israel and good relationship with the Arabs. Whenever anything happens, he brings them in Sharm el-Sheikh and they reconcile between them, and both of them, they go back happily. But it's not working as we hope it will work. I believe this time, because everyone was very sincere this time to make peace, he will go and visit Israel definitely when there will be peace between them and the Palestinians. Definitely.
Okay, next. The gentleman over here.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadat. I'm Tom Getman. I worked on the Hill for 10 years and then 25 years with a relief and development agency in Gaza. And I'm reminded that when people hit the rock of women, they will break their swords. And we really thank you for the cry of your heart. I want to do a follow-up to your colleague from the newspaper in Egypt. There is some concern that, in fact, the peace between Israel and Egypt may be slipping around the Gaza situation in particular, the tunnels and everything. And I'm wondering, are you confident that the peace is strong and will hold with the pressures that are there, particularly with a conservative government now in Israel?
I believe it will happen. I believe, as I said, I'm not young, but I believe I will see it in my lifetime. It will happen. As I said, people wanted peace. People are fed up from the violence, fed up from the killing. When you watch the TV and see what's happening in Gaza, what's happening between the Israelis and the Palestinians, it's something which will break your heart. You know, we don't want to see this, but I believe that they are now wanted to do something, because they went through since 1993 when the Palestinians started making peace with Israel, and it didn't work. That was during Rabin's time. It didn't work, but there is, negotiation. it stops and then it stops and continues. But I believe this time, I don't know why I do have this, I read it, or I do, Netanyahu will change. I believe he will change. He will change. I know that he didn't do anything last time, and he was not willing to do. But this time, I think he learned the lesson. He saw that Begin, who was the strongest leader in Likud, made peace. Why don't he imitate him? He will do it. And also, don't forget that what is happening, it affects the economy. Although the economy is affected all over the world, but even though with wars between us, it is worse. That's why I am feeling that there will be change, and Mubarak will help to bring them together. The Arab League are helping also to bring all the Arabs together. Everyone is doing his best, and there is a kind of sincerity in the air, I would say, that I feel it. I hope it will reach, inshallah.
Okay. Other questions? Sir, right here.
Thank you, Mrs. Sadat. As an ex-professor, history,
If you could identify yourself, sir.
pardon me,
If you could identify yourself as well.
Dr. Richard Stevens, Georgetown, Khartoum University, Kuwait University, Mustashar, University that disappeared by name in the Kingdom of Lesotho. I just want to say, my concern and efforts for the last 53 years, from the time I began graduate study at Georgetown, have focused on two areas: South Africa, Israel, Palestine. I just want to tell you that I never expected to see the change in South Africa. I could not have believed. But I studied the dynamic, and I have studied the dynamic of Israel, and both in terms of the larger world. When I said goodbye to my former student when she left the South African embassy to return to South Africa, she was my student in Lesotho as a refugee in 63, 64. I am confident that you are right. The dynamic in both areas will eventually bring about the type of situation I think you are longing for.
Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. Right here in front.
Ladies first.
Hi. Thank you so much. It's an honor to see you. I'm Diane Perlman. I'm a clinical and political psychologist and involved in conflict transcend and psychologist for social responsibility. And part of achieving what we all want and what we're talking about, there's a body of knowledge in social sciences of conflict transformation, tension reduction, things like people would rather get their needs met by decent means, and when they're blocked, they become more extreme, or people are more dangerous when they're afraid. And in fact, some of my close colleagues are at University of Maryland, who work on, Rick McCauley, who work on radicalization, what makes people radical. So, and George Mitchell's heart is in the right place, and his sensibilities seem to be there. But I'm wondering if there are people on a team that are, say, highly trained and skilled in, for example, punishing Hamas probably made them more dangerous. If they would, when they won the election, if they would have been allowed to go, people become less violent when they're given legitimate political.
Team?
Yes. So yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Is there a team? Could you
Yeah.
finish
Or
the
are there
question?
people that are working on the process that?
I bet there must be a team there.
Usually.
Not usually. That will be a shock for me, because I don't think they are working without teamwork, who learn and who knew and trained, as you said. There must. By the way, my granddaughter has this one like you, And that, what you call it, Khamsa, that was when my husband visited Israel. Mrs. Meir gave it to him as a gift to my first granddaughter who was born when my husband was in Israel. And she keeps it, and she always say, this is from Mrs. Meir.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you. Sir.
I'm Peter Zuckerman from the Human Progress Network, interested in human progress and survival. And the problem, of course, is ideas are great, but the problem is implementation. Many years ago, I developed a comprehensive solution to the problems of the Middle East and even the world. And I contacted the Arab League, locally, of course, the Embassy of Egypt, the Royal Embassy of Saudi Arabia. The ideas were dismissed, and the ideas were actually published in a book. I mean, they are good, realistic ideas. So the problem is implementation. How do we implement ideas when there is resistance or not understanding or whatever?
Do you have any thoughts on how we move to kind of turn that into kind of a more focused question? How do we implement? You know, there is a certain set of basic framework agreements that were hammered out largely in the Geneva process about a decade ago. And so we know to a large extent what the framework of an Israeli-Palestinian agreement will look like. What are some of the main obstacles to getting to that agreement do you see? Is it about Hamas Fatah? Where do you see some of the main obstacles?
Sure, as I always say, first of all, Hamas and Fatah has to unite. They have to unite. That was a big problem also facing them, because Hamas is but they have to recognize Israel. They have to, Fatah already recognized Israel, and Hamas has to recognize Israel so that they can sit and negotiate. How can they sit without neglecting, not recognizing Israel? This is a fact. I know that there are obstacles. I know that. And there were obstacles during my husband's time with Begin. There were many obstacles.
Big difference between the leader at that time and the leader. This is how to implement the idea.
Well,
There is no leader at
but
this time.
Saud, if we wait for leaders, we will not do anything. We will wait and wait and wait.
The real problem now with Sadat.
Well,
We like to see the leader look to his nation before himself.
that's true. You are right. You are right. You are right. And this is what Sadat did and Begin did also. Both sides did it. And that's why I am hoping that Netanyahu will imitate Begin. He doesn't have to be as strong as Begin, but just to imitate him. And it will work. It will work.
Okay, in back with the red tie.
Thank you very much. My name is Khalid Khairi from Al Hurra TV. I don't have a question actually, but I would like to say thank you very much for President Sadat, who saves us as Egyptians. And thank you for President Sadat also, because he chose Mubarak, who continue in peace process. And this is very important issue, because someone else couldn't make like President Mubarak. So thank you very much. I'm proud for President Sadat to achieve peace with Israel, and proud again for him to choose Mubarak. I would like to highlight a very short story. Back to the history.
Very short, please.
Yes, back to the history. Prophet Muhammad, when he strayed from Mecca to Medina, his guide was Jewish. So nobody in the West know that the relationship between Muslims and Jews in the history. So if the religions talking about this good relationship, meaning that we can do it now. And the last question for you, when Sadat told you that he will go to Israel in this night, I would like to know your feeling. Thank you.
Well, to be honest, I was extremely happy. I was extremely torn inside, and I didn't show it. I didn't talk about it, because I know once he will go to Israel, he will be killed. This I was very sure about it, because we received many threats that once he went to Israel, he will be killed. And he went, he knew it, I knew it, we didn't talk about it, but it didn't stop either one of us from being sincere in making peace and encouraging each other.
Okay, thank you. Right here in the back row.
My name's Peter Shutley from Brookings Institution. Thank you very much for coming. When you mentioned your basic principles at the beginning, they tended to focus on leaders and the power and the importance of leaders. And my question is, I agree with you in those, but when our government, U.S. government, tries to nudge countries in the Middle East and the Arab world forward, the answer frequently is we can't. The Arab street won't allow us. The Arab street wouldn't support moves toward peace in this way. And so my question to you is, your husband was a unique individual with amazing leadership abilities. How can today's and tomorrow's leaders in the Arab Muslim world overcome that Arab street opinion and do what your husband did?
Well, first of all, I want to say, as I mentioned before, that the Arab does not hate America, does not hate the leaders. They hate the bias to Israel and not to the Arabs. This is something very clear and obvious to everyone. That's why so many people hated during Bush's time, that he was very, very biased to Israel, neglecting the Palestinians and the Arabs. That is the reason. What we want is to be fair with both. We want the leader, and I believe President Obama will be fair with both. That will help a lot in solving the problem. That was during President Carter's time with Sadat and Begin. He was fair with both sides. He didn't bias to the Egyptian or to the Israelis, but he was fair with both. This is what we are looking for. So, the leader, especially from the United States, because you are the strongest country still till today, that you can help in bringing about the peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. But the leaders or whoever goes has to be fair with both sides.
What were some of the instances back during the Camp David process with President Carter that showed to you that he was being fair to both Egypt and Israel? Could you describe some of those? Kind of any impressions that you...
He was fair with Begin. He was the same with Sadat. He was, when there was a problem about the two settlements in Sinai to be, Sadat didn't accept it. He said, I don't want to take Sinai with any settlement on it. And it was a very big problem and a big obstacle in front of even the treaty itself. But President Carter played a very important role in this. He went back and forth between Begin and Sadat, till he convinced Begin that Begin didn't want to do this because he said it will put me in the history that I am the one who destroyed or dismantled the settled. And the idea came from President Carter and Sadat to tell him that let the Knesset take this decision, not you personally. And this what happened, and this shows and tells you that President Carter was very fair with both sides.
Let me rephrase my question a little bit.
Yes.
In the following way. When your president went to Israel, public opinion in Egypt didn't say we strongly support President Sadat's trip to Egypt. He went against public opinion. That was real leadership. And so my question, it's easy for any leader in a country today to say the public won't support what I want to do. But what's needed is a leader who goes against public opinion, who will say the right thing to do is to build bridges, make peace, in contrast to public opinion, like your husband did. What can be done to achieve something like that?
But I want to remind you of something. When my husband came from Israel, 7 million at least came out, Egyptian people came out to greet him coming back from Israel. That means that the people were not against Sadat. No, not at all. Some were, yes. Some were against Camp David, against any relationship with Israel, yes. But they are few. Although sometimes their voice is very high, but they are few. The majority of the Egyptian people were with Sadat when he went to Israel, and that's why millions greeted him on his way back. It's from the airport to our home, it takes half an hour maximum. He came in 3 hours and a half because of the crowded people who were just greeting him.
Okay, thank you. Right here.
Hi, my name is Christina Gergis, and I'm from Voices for Democratic Egypt. It's an honor to hear you speak today. I had 2 questions. First, what do you think Egypt's role should be in the conflict in the future? What role should they play? And secondly, how do you feel?
Sorry, whose role?
Egypt's.
Egypt's role.
Yeah. And secondly, how do you feel about Egypt's treatment of the situation in Gaza earlier this year, in terms of the Rafah border and keeping it closed and not allowing entry for people who were injured and sick?
Well, Egypt is playing, as I mentioned before, a very important role for bringing about the peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis. What happened during Gaza, we were, helping the Gaza. We opened our hospitals for the wounded Palestinians to come and to be medically treated. But coming through the borders, just like that, without any legally way, it's not right. Egypt is a country that has her rules, has her permission. You can't just cross the border like that. You have to have ID or something at least to cross. That's what happens from some of the Palestinians, which they told them not to do it again. But Egypt opened her hospitals, opened her arms for the Palestinians who wanted to come and visit, but not as, coming in, just flocks of people, thousands and thousands and thousands.
Masses.
Yes, but Egypt was always standing and helping the Palestinians all the way since my husband and before my husband also.
Okay. Another question. What I wanted to ask is, in your book, you also talk about the relationship between Islam and the extremism, the fundamentalism and extremism, and you place the blame not on Islam but more on poverty, on humiliation, on socioeconomic conditions. Could you talk more about this relationship? Because I think it gets really to the heart of, President Obama just released on Friday his strategy for Afghanistan and Pakistan. And it's incomplete, I think, if we don't really understand what you're talking about. So could you just describe that a little bit more?
Well, I noticed that Islam is misunderstood here in the West and in Europe, especially after 9/11. I was trying in my book to explain what Islam is about. Suicide bombers are anathema to Islam. They are not allowed to commit suicide because our souls is not in our hands to decide to finish it or to stop it. It's in God's hands, not our. That's why suicide bombers are anathema to Islam. Also, the Quran plainly states that suicide bombers are I forgot the word, but it's tantamount to killing all mankind, which means that you don't have the right to kill anyone, especially innocent people, and any people really, It's not in your hands to decide this. It's in God's hands. This is one of the things which I wanted just to explain what is suicide bombers. People feel here that they are Muslims fanatics. No, it is a response for occupation, not for Islam. Suicide bombers, they are doing this because they are occupied, but not because they are Muslims. This is something, little things like that, which I tried about women, for instance, the rights for women in Islam. We have many rights at a time. 1,430 years ago, we had rights to buy and to buy and sell and do whatever we want in our name, not going to take my husband's permission, and to possess land and to do whatever we want. And it happened to the England and America in the mid-1900s, but not before that. We had it 1,400 years ago, which means we had a lot of things. It is interpretation of the Quran which affects the people. It is some sort of culture or things like that, or traditions which people confuse between them and Islam. Islam gave women so many rights. At a time, as I said, nobody had the same. We have the right to educate ourselves, to go to schools, actually the Quran started read. The first thing is to read and to educate yourself. It is misunderstood, and I bet so many times I noticed also here that after 9/11, they started explaining about what are the Muslims are about. We are not, civil violence. We don't want violence. We don't want to kill. It is all these things are against Islam. And these people are not real Muslims, and they don't belong to any religion, because any religion will not tell you to go and kill. This is what I tried in my book just to explain it. And when you read it, you will find much more explanation.
Thank you. Okay. One more question here.
Hi, Mrs. Sadat. My name is Dana West, and I actually saw you about 30 years ago. I was a photo editor at the White House and did a little photo album for you and your husband. I've been a public servant most of my life, and the whole issue of female suicide bombers really concerns many of us. Most recently, I worked for a Defense Department organization that focuses on stopping IED attacks. But could you tell us about some of the programs you're aware of that specifically address supporting women so that they do not turn to this kind of behavior? And if I might add, you alluded to, some of the atrocities that are committed in Afghanistan as it relates to, everyone, but particularly girls trying to go to school. What kinds of programs are you aware of, and what would you recommend that the U.S. do to better support those programs? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, you are doing a very good job in Afghanistan by educating the girls. The schools are open once again, and the women are going back to the schools, which was not during the Taliban at all, which is a very, very good sign. You are doing your best, and we are in Egypt doing our best. We are educating our women. We are trying to raise the standard of the people, especially in the rural areas. And education in Egypt is free all the way through the university. We can't do more than this, really, because this is a burden even on the government. It is very expensive, but it is what is happening in Egypt. It is free education, and but we still have illiterate people. We have many programs with the help of the United States, with the help of some other countries in Europe. They are, because these programs, of course, is also, it needs expenses, it needs money, and we are doing our best to do this. And let us hope that will not be more war so that we can concentrate on our, as I said, on our problems. We have many things to do, but we are just, because of the wars, the budget is not enough for things like that to help. The budget is almost to the war and almost to help in weapons and things like that, which if we think about, and you here in the United States, you are against terrorists, which is a good thing. You are following them everywhere. But believe me, if there will be peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the terrorists will calm down. We cannot eliminate all the terrorists all over the world, but they will be much less, because what is happening in Iraq, what is happening with the Palestinians, they are recruiting terrorists, thinking that they are doing this to help the problem, because the Palestinians are occupied, the Iraqi are occupied, and terrorists are using this. Let us help them in not being occupied, and believe me, that will be less cost and less, spending a lot. You spend billions and billions in Iraq, which and it didn't stop the terrorists. On the contrary, they became even more, which is a terrible thing, really. Bringing the terrorists down is educating the people, giving more opportunities to the youth and more job opportunities, more housing, more things like that. That will be the real thing to bring the terrorists down.
Okay, thank you. We're going to close it off here. Please join me in thanking Dr. Sadat.
Thank you so much. Thank you.